Hello, my name is Prateek Mahajan, and I'm a first year MA student pursuing a development studies option in the Department of Political Science. As a part of the speaker series for the seminar on climate change and development, we will be having a discussion today with Dr. Geetanjoy Sahu. Dr. Sahu is an associate professor at the Center for Science, Technology, and Society, School of Habitat Studies, Tata Institute of Social Sciences at Mumbai, India. He holds a PhD in political science from the Institute for Social and Economic Change in Bangalore, India. His research and teaching interests include environmental jurisprudence, environmental regulation and policy, land and forest rights, the political economy of public policy implementation, and environmental movements at large. Apart from an academic, he has also served in government committees in different capacities. He was one of the members of the Chhattisgarh government's task force on evaluation of Forest Rights Act in 2021. He was part of the Ministry of Environment, Forests and Climate Change, Government of India committee to discuss the requirement of notification to make the accreditation system for environmental consultants in India mandatory or not in 2016. Dr. Sahu, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Um, so I would start us off by talking a bit more about one of the key elements of environmental jurisprudence in India, which is the Forest Rights Act of 2005. So in your paper titled Promoting a Responsive State, the Role of NGOs in Decentralized Forest Governance in India, you claim that the Community Forest Rights Act of 2005 was poorly implemented because it ignores the capability of communities to exercise those rights and carry out the responsibilities vested in them. The issue you raise about the capability to exercise one's right is also central to Martha Nussbaum's capability approach and Amartya Sen's argument to view development as freedom. The argument here is that the mere achievement of environmental rights is not enough. To truly benefit from them, one needs certain capacities to exercise them. So, in the context of the Forest Rights Act, Dr. Sahu, what do these capabilities look like on the ground, especially amongst Adivasi tribal communities?
Right. So, Pratik, when we say capabilities, it's not just about communities here. We are talking about capabilities of various institutions in which communities are part of those institutions or governing those institutions. Okay. So, one is individual level capacity, one is institutional level capacity.
Mhm.
Now, many of these tribal regions in India where you find historically basic services like education, services like information providing agencies, these are not available. So, their capability to understand the policy, law, institutions has never been taken into account while framing the law, which is going to affect them or which is going to benefit them. So these
Mhm.
capabilities in the context of Forest Rights Act, as the law is very clear that it is the responsibility of the state agencies to avail all kinds of information to the community to understand the process, their rights, and how should they apply their claims to the concerned authority. So these capabilities, when I say these are the capabilities about information, capabilities about the procedure, capability about the evidences that they are supposed to submit to the authority to claim their rights. So these capabilities are very crucial and central to make any public policy effective, and more importantly, in the context of tribals and forest dwelling communities who have been historically not been informed about policies, rules, and regulations. Very often, without their consent, without their knowledge, policy, rules, regulations are framed. When it comes to implementation, they are simply asked to sort of follow the policy or submit the claims without any prior work done by the agencies. So these capabilities to access information, capabilities to file claim, capabilities to understand the legal procedure are very weak among the forest dwelling communities, and that is one of the reasons why Forest Rights Act has not been implemented in many parts of the country, because the capabilities of the beneficiaries have not been improved, which was the responsibility of the state and the nodal agencies, in this case, the tribal department. Unfortunately, that was not taken seriously. Even today, also, after 15 years of FRA implementation, we still find communities have no idea what does it mean, why these rights are important, and after recognition, what are they supposed to do, and also after recognition, their capabilities to manage the forest, their capabilities to govern the forest by their own rules and regulations, which the Forest Rights Act very clearly says that it is a process which recognize decentralized governance structure, and in this case, the Gram Sabha, the communities are the authorities to decide how the forest landscape in their recognized area to be managed, protected, or regenerated wherever rights are recognized. So that is what I mean to say capabilities.
Okay, so a key feature of capacity building in that context would be um, to fill that information gap that exists between the right existing on paper, whereas the right being recognized and empowering people on the ground. And that would
Right.
require us filling in that information gap. In that context, in that same paper, you also say that NGOs
Hmm.
play a big role um,
Hmm.
in filling this capacity gap. Could you
Hmm.
elaborate more on what role you think NGOs have played in states such as Maharashtra to
Hmm. Hmm.
strengthen those capabilities?
Yeah. So NGOs, grassroots organizations, various forest rights groups, even individuals have played a very, very crucial role in the enforcement of Forest Rights Act across the country. Okay. Even I would say when the law was sort of drafted at that time, many NGOs, forest rights groups played very important role in drafting the laws. Okay, so both in the drafting as well as in the post enactment of the law, NGOs have been very, very crucial in the implementation of FRA. Now, overall, if you look at in the last 15 years, I see there are four different models in the implementation of FRA.
Mm-hmm.
One model is where Gram Sabhas themselves take so moto initiative, file claims, because some of these Gram Sabhas are historically well organized. Collective action has been very high in those regions. They are also aware of the procedures. So there are active Gram Sabhas. So whenever there is a law or policy, they are very assertive in that case. So, but these number of Gram Sabhas are very, very few across the country. That is one model. Gram Sabhas taking so moto initiatives to claim their rights. Second model, which is emerging, especially in Maharashtra, is a group of Gram Sabhas, what is called Federation of Gram Sabhas.
Mm-hmm.
Here, 30, 40, even in case of Korchi Gram Sabha or Devri or Devri and Paivir, Panchayat, that village area, you find many of these Gram Sabhas coming together and forming a federation, because individually the Gram Sabha finds it difficult to challenge the authority or demand before the authority to get information. So this is the second model, the Gram Sabha federation model. Third model is there are initiatives taken by the government departments to implement FRA, which again is very, very selective approach, I would say. And this kind of government intervention happens when elections are, around the corner. Otherwise, you don't see government departments taking serious interest in the implementation of FRA. And the fourth model is what I see is the important model, that is NGO driven FR implementation. And in this NGO driven FR implementation, when I say, I include here the grassroots organizations, the unregistered organizations, the individuals, forest rights groups, practitioners. They all have played very, very important role in the implementation of FR across the country, whether it is Himachal Pradesh, Odisha, Jharkhand, Maharashtra, Central India. Wherever you see today, there is better implementation of FRA, and these are the areas where NGOs are active, or NGOs have been working for quite some time, even before FRA came into picture. Now, what kind of role these NGOs play in these areas? One is creating awareness, training program, capacity building of these Gram Sabhas, forest rights groups, forest rights committees. So awareness building. Second is they facilitate the claim process, because many of these villages, even they don't have the claim form. So these NGOs avail these forms and they facilitate the claim. And third, they don't stop in only in filing claim. They also follow it up to see whether any sort of action has been taken about those claims. And fourth is about after recognition, how to integrate line department schemes and programs so that the recognized rights are meaningful, so that integration of line department schemes and programs happen, which will benefit the community after the recognition. So these are the kind of roles that NGOs are playing. But again, among the NGOs in India, you have different strategies, different methods they apply. Some of these NGOs follow a very, very selective approach. Some NGOs follow both. They cooperate with the establishment, but also at the same time they confront the establishment whenever there are deviation, whenever there are procedures which are not within the purview of the law. And there are also NGOs which are actively involved in filing litigations so that the act is implemented, or any kind of violation of the act is brought to the attention of the judiciary. Okay, so that is how I see the NGOs are important, because many of these regions where you find state agencies are active, it is the failure of the state agencies which has created that vacuum. And historically, NGOs in India have played very important role in enforcement on public policy, and FR is not an exception to that. So I see the NGOs are very important in the implementation.
Okay. Yeah, to speak a little bit more on um, the decentralization of the implementation of Forest Rights Act.
Mhm.
There's another act, especially in scheduled areas, which is the Panchayat Extension to Scheduled Areas Act of 1996,
Right, right.
which, especially in states such as Maharashtra and Chhattisgarh, has
Mhm.
aimed to promote decentralization of governing power to
Mhm.
Adivasi communities on the ground.
Mhm. Mhm. Mhm.
How successful has the PESA Act
Mhm.
here
Mhm.
been in providing that level of local agency required
Mhm.
to benefit from the Forest Rights Act?
Right. Like FRA, PESA is one of the progressive legislations with reference to rights-based resource policies and programs in India. PESA was enacted with the intention that the panchayats, the gram sabhas, become more crucial or more central in the decision-making process with reference to your commons, whether it is land, water, forest, especially minor forest produce. So in India today, you have 10 scheduled areas, and in these 10 scheduled areas, you have a more than sort of 5 million, sorry 5% of tribals are living in these areas. In all this, if you include also northeast, which comes on northeast, especially Assam, Mizoram, Meghalaya, and I think Tripura, these are the states which come
Mhm.
under your six scheduled areas. So PESA is not applicable to northeast states, but it is applicable to many of these regions, especially in central India, southern India, like Andhra Pradesh, Telangana, Maharashtra here, and Odisha, Jharkhand, Madhya Pradesh. Then you have Himachal Pradesh to some parts of Gujarat. So all these states, you find the significance of the panchayat extension to scheduled areas, and the act was enacted to make the Gram Sabhas more powerful in the decision making process. Earlier, we had 73rd Amendment that was about giving decision making power, especially the financial, administrative, and the legislative power to the decentralized bodies. But PESA brought a new dimension, especially in scheduled areas, where many of those powers which were not given under 73rd Amendment to the Gram Sabhas and Panchayats are recognized. More importantly, the customary and traditional rights of forest dwelling communities, especially in the scheduled areas, are recognized. So it's a very decentralized policy, decentralized law recognizing the role and significance of Gram Sabhas with reference to commons, with reference to minor forest produce, and also PESA talks about for the first time a consultative process. And we had previously several interesting judgments coming related to PESA, like the Samata versus Union of India case, where the Supreme Court of India emphasized the importance of the scheduled areas, tribal communities in the diversion of forest areas. So I see the significance of PESA. Unfortunately, it has not been effectively implemented in many of these scheduled areas for various reasons. Again, like as I said, the awareness, information about the act is not there among the tribal communities, and states are not willing to decentralize power for various reasons.
Hmm. So you think the PESA has sort of the similar information capability limitation that the FRA has, right? Um, to move to a different side of your research. So you're also a political economist, and you look at the way mass politics impacts environmental jurisprudence. So
Hmm.
arguably, the Forest Rights Act's passing in 2005 came following a decades-long social movement on the issue of infrastructure development and local agency over the environment. And here I'm
Hmm. Hmm.
particularly thinking about the Narmada Bachao Andolan.
Hmm. Hmm.
Yet, despite this mobilization amongst Adivasis and the successful passing of the Forest Rights Act and the Panchayat Extension to Scheduled Areas Act, these rights-based policies, to my understanding, fall short in attracting community-based participation amongst Adivasis.
Hmm. Hmm.
You further highlighted the role of NGOs in assisting decentralized forest governance in India, but do you think there is perhaps a lack of true bottom-up Adivasi leadership when it comes to mass mobilization for environmental rights? Like, are these social movements missing out on having leaders um, and decision makers of those social movements who are from the community?
Hmm. Hmm. Yes, I think, see, when you look at the social movements in India, uh, definitely they contributed significantly to public discourse, especially in evolving or in demanding public policies which are very very important for the marginalized communities. Okay, so there is no denying of the fact that social movements played crucial role in shaping public policy in India, especially in the post-emergency period. But when you look at the types of movements around resources, whether it is Narmada movement, whether it is movement by the tribals, the Niyamgiri Hill protest, or POSCO, Vedanta movements against these companies, or what we witnessed in the recent past in many other states, especially central Indian states, Jharkhand, Madhya Pradesh, and Chhattisgarh, we see there is a change in the approach of the movements. They are not always now, you see, following the traditional strategies and methods. They are not about just protest and dharana. These are also movements which generate a lot of data set, facts, and then they build the narrative around that. But what is interesting to witness over the last 2 decades, movements are increasingly going to court or tribunals to seek justice. Now, why this is happening? Because electoral politics in India, to a great extent, has failed to address some of these rights-based concerns like your right to health, right to environment, right to water, right to education. They are not addressed through your electoral politics, unfortunately. So many of these issues are now increasingly addressed through judicial intervention, and social movements have strategically exercised the legal framework that we have or the constitutional provisions to assert their rights. And fortunately, judiciary has been very, very sort of uh, uh, positive in that sense to give direction to protect their rights, and there are several landmark judgments in the recent past. So even though there are no proper representations in these social movements, many of the social movements are leaderless. Sometimes you don't know, what exactly is the organization about the social movement. You don't know their resource strength. You don't know about the strategies. But in a democratic society like ours, and that's such a huge landscape and diversity, it is very difficult to organize always movements on a particular principle. So obviously there will have so many differences, and more so in rural India, you find where the struggle is not just for subsistence based livelihood. It is also about aspiration level lifestyle or well-being of the community, where the issues and strategies are changing. And that's why today you find, even though representation is not happening, but someone who is concerned about tribal rights sitting in Delhi or Mumbai filing a petition to protect the rights of the tribals in Jharkhand. And that is again thanks to judicial intervention, where today you have public interest litigations. Any third party can represent the interest of the marginalized community. So that is benefiting many of these communities, though the scale and form of intervention from third party representation is very, very low. Still, it has made a huge difference in many of these cases. And today, also, you have public spirited citizens, public spirited lawyers who volunteer to represent these social movements without charging fees. And these changes are quite interesting, and they are most sort of progressive in many places. And that's why today you see, like the kind of judgment that Niyamgiri Hill movement, organizations, people have got that order from the Supreme Court. So these are, I think, some of the interesting developments, and one hopes that more organizations, more networks, more public spirited citizens will join this kind of forum to support these groups who are vulnerable, who are helpless, but fighting within the purview of the law. Okay, so that is where I see the social movements and their future struggle in this context.
Okay. And you've been speaking about social movements and the close role that they hold, that they have with the judiciary in India. I just want to perhaps revisit a claim that you made back in 2008 in your article on the state of environmental jurisprudence in India. And there you claim that the Supreme Court of India and the judiciary at large um, is sort of um, an exception or an example in the world where the places to seek change or resolve conflict on environmental issues isn't electoral politics or legislation, but it's in the court. But in light of the changes to the salience of environmental degradation and climate change issues, how important climate change issues have become in the past 10 years, as well as the changes in the nature and composition of the Indian Supreme Court in the past decade. What would you say about the claim that the court, the judiciary, is still the place to seek environmental justice?
Okay. Yeah, I think we need to understand that in the Indian political system and the kind of political structures that our founding members design, it gives lot of space for judicial intervention. Okay, and I would say Indian judiciary historically, if you look at, played a very important role in the protection and promotion of human rights issues. Okay, so there is no denying of the fact that how these courts intervention in the past really helped, especially the marginalized and downtrodden, groups in the society. It became prominent in the post-emergency period where the Supreme Court of India started liberalizing most of the principles, including the PIL that I just mentioned, where it created space for third party representation. It created space for innovations. It also introduced a series of new principles like your PIL is one of the important principles. Your in the context of environment, they introduced various principles like your absolute liability, precautionary principle, polluter pays principle. They emphasize generation and intra-generation equity. Many of these principles were introduced by the court, and these principles really shaped public policy in the subsequent decades. Okay, so it played a very important role in the protection and management of environment in India, because many of these judges who were part of the various environmental judgment, they were of the belief that environment cannot speak for itself. Somebody has to bring to the court's notice about the degradation of environment or pollution of rivers or tigers are disappearing. So somebody has to bring to the attention of the court because environment cannot speak for itself. Okay, so that
Mm-hmm.
was the philosophy when they started hearing PILs on environmental issues. Yes, we
Yeah,
see.
those are public interest litigations, right?
Yes, yes, yes. We see some kind of inconsistency in judicial intervention. Some cases they are very defensive. Some cases they justify certain projects in the name of national interest, even though they are violating various procedures, rules, and regulations. Nevertheless, Indian judiciary has played a crucial role in promoting the environmental justice in India or contributing to environmental jurisprudence in India. There are many areas where the Indian judiciary, the judicial role needs to be, strengthened, and also it requires a lot of interventions in terms of training, capacity building, because the judges of the Supreme Court or High Court who deliver these kind of important judgments, unfortunately, they are not part of various training programs or orientations about environment discourse, environment rules and regulations. Okay, and these are also not adversarial litigations. These are public interest litigations where largely they focus on facts and oral arguments made by the lawyers. So then
Mm-hmm.
the training of the judges and the training of especially the High Court and Supreme Court judges on environmental issues need to be improved. And the no doubt today we have Green Tribunal at the national level, and you have journal benches. Even in these green tribunals, the judges who are part of the green tribunals, you find based on the judgment analysis that we did earlier, that many of these cases we find judges are not acquainted with the larger environmental context in which these rights and development projects are contested or they are challenged. So I see the role of judiciary is important, and it has to play an important role. But at the same time, there is huge scope to improve its role and interventions to make the judgments more effective.
Dr. Sahu, thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate your time and for discussing with us an important issue of um, the importance that the legal field um, um, and environmental jurisprudence can play um, to tackle the problem of environmental degradation as well as climate change. So thank you.
Thank you, Pratik. Thank you so much. Thank you.